So I have kind of like a format. I think of it as like Mad Libs whenever I'm writing a prompt. We can get it to do whatever deliverable we want at the end. Kind of want it to be a conversation, get the information we need, and then say, great, now write an executive summary on that, for example.
So many things. I probably put this in a box. I think this kind of showed that it really might be a way of fine-tuning a thought or deciding kind of like where to attack something first, and that there's a lot you can use it in, as opposed to this idea of something that we need to put off and down the road until we understand it more.
Welcome to AI Fishbowl, the show where you get to watch as we coach and train education professionals to solve their problems using AI tools.
So get ready to elevate your educational practices with AI Fishbowl with me, Audrey Ellis, and Zia Hassan. All right, so on this episode, we were joined by Allison Dolan-Wilson, who is the Vice President of Institutional Advancement at my former institution, Northern Essex Community College. We're so glad that she joined us. She oversees a lot of functional areas at her institution. One of those areas is the non-credit side of the house. So whether that's like a corporate partnerships or, you want to get like a credential, or even you want to get CPR training, those all fall under the non-credit umbrella at a community college.
So Allison came to us and really wanted to understand how she can use AI to leverage the types of tasks that she does in her work. She wants to streamline some things, enhance her creativity and efficiency, and support her decision-making. And I think you'll see when you watch this or listen to this, that she's really trying to use ChatGPT or any AI as a thought partner to develop her ideas, and almost like it's a trusted advisor that she's working with, a co-pilot, if you will.
Totally. And if you're listening to this, we want to kind of give you a couple of ideas of what to listen for as we kind of go through this whole prompting exercise with her. Even if you're not able to see the screen, there are three really big takeaways here. The first is that we really want to make sure that Allison left with a good idea about how to use AI as that thought partner for decision making. So not just necessarily taking everything it says as a factual statement, but really thinking and kind of iteratively going back and forth with the tool. We talk a lot about how she can customize her use of AI depending on the specific need she has, the audience, the deliverable. And then we really just never want to let go of keeping the human as an important part of this entire process when it comes to using AI. So we talk a lot about keeping the human in the loop and also just balancing AI with humanity. So we hope you enjoy the conversation and stick around at the end for some of our reflections after.
And without any further ado, Allison Dolan-Wilson. If you could just tell me on a scale of 1 to 4, like 1 being like, I want to run away screaming, I'm terrified. 2 being like, I've played around, I've dabbled, like, I kind of get the idea and gist of it. 3, like I use it every day. And 4, I could maybe teach someone how to use some of these ideas. Where would you rate yourself?
Yeah, I would probably say maybe a 2.5, and I'm just more so using it in terms of my work and my output in terms of helping there, but certainly am eager to learn about how I can use it in terms of streamlining things, helping with creativity and efficiency, and bringing other team members on board.
So I heard a few words in there. I heard creativity, efficiency, and streamlining. Of those verbs, which seems the most important today?
I love myself some efficiency.
Okay. So I want you to tell us a little bit about some of the tasks you do that you feel right now are repetitive, monotonous, you hate them, and you'd like to outsource those and offload a little bit to an AI if you could.
One of the things that first came to mind is when we are considering to perhaps launch a new non-credit certificate or courses. We've made great headway, I believe, in terms of deciding how we go about it. It's not just someone says, hey, you know what you think? I think you should have, because I need an employee here, is you should offer a certificate in this, or you should offer a certificate in that. We really try and say, oh, okay, but what does that look like? What is the current landscape? Projecting out as much as possible to say, what will the need be? Is it going to make sense for us to offer a course in this? Cost, future job prospects, skills that people need to have ahead of time before taking the course, upward mobility in terms of what this job will pay, all of those coming into play. And right now we have a program. It's a software that we use that several people use to help us determine some of that. And I feel that there's probably more pieces that we could pull in to create a more full picture that gets hyper localized in terms of where we are, who we are, what we're currently offering, the businesses around us, what the landscape looks. I think it extrapolates out maybe 5 or 10 years, takes into consideration who our students are, who our region, where we pull students from, to really help us have a tight case in terms of we really need to be focusing our efforts in creating this curriculum. We really should focus on doing this. And in some cases, maybe why we shouldn't, because again, everyone's always quick with an idea of what they think, you should do. And as much as we obviously want to listen and hear and be a good partner and a good collaborator, it behooves us to really make sure that we're understanding the landscape, taking all of this into consideration so that we can give a good, thoughtful answer in terms of why and how and where and when we should be offering new curriculum.
So it sounds like one of your main goals is to figure out, if I'm going to generate some kind of new curriculum, new course offering, I want to make sure that it fits into what we're currently doing in a way that doesn't overlap with other things that we're currently offering, in a way that it offers something new, and that there's an audience for. We have to really understand our students to make sure that it's something that will fit into the landscape. Is that accurate?
And it's answering both the community need and the student need. So is what we're offering answering a need in the community in terms of a developed workforce? And is what we're offering going to be able to provide our students with a good upwardly mobile job?
Okay.
And again, this is focused in, I just want to clarify that I'm specifically talking about non-credit, because that can go a little faster to implementation than non-credit. And that is something that we think about in terms of, as we build that, but that obviously takes a lot longer. So on the non-credit side, we can be far more nimble. And because of that, sometimes I think we might go too fast. So how might AI be used to use all of these different information elements to help us make the best decision possible in the quickest way?
What would be the preferred output? Like, if you had to think of, like, is it a report? Is it a table? Is it like a yes or no decision? Is it a conversation, an iterative thing that you move back and forth with AI? Like, what is the output that you're looking for?
It's funny, as you were saying each thing, as I was like, yes, no, no, yes,
Okay.
no. I would want probably a really in-depth report for myself to pour into and over, but with a really tight executive summary that kind of almost leads towards a yes, no, that gives a little bit of color commentary into why.
Okay, cool. So I'm so glad, Allison, that you picked this topic, because I think that a lot of people could benefit and relate to this. I wanted to use ChatGPT 4.0 today, but I just like a couple caveats. This is the paid version that I'm going to use, but I think like 95% of this could still be done in just the regular 4. And then I think that you could do a lot of this in Claude as well, but you wouldn't be able to search the internet, which ChatGPT in the Pro and 4 version of it you can. So I think that's a really valuable piece. And then the other, I'm sure you could do a lot of this in Google Gemini too. I just tend to go to ChatGPT more often. So that's why I picked this one. And then I guess the last thing I will say, Allison, is just something to keep in mind with this specific application is that AI can hallucinate. And so I think you know this, but worth saying, when we're asking it to report facts or factual statements, it wants to make you happy, and it wants to report factual statements even if it doesn't know them. And I've actually found that recently ChatGPT 4.0 has been like really hot to trot when it comes to hallucinating, because it's so new. It's like eager to. So all that to say that, unlike the technology you were referencing or that platform, whatever we were to create should be pretty rigorously fact checked before decisions were made. But it could also be a way to perhaps really quickly also iterate on the content that you are going to give to different people, depending on what style they need to be convinced. As you were saying, like, you might need an executive summary out of something, but you do have some facts that you want to plug in. Vice versa, we can use it to do some research. So we're staring at a blank screen. Let's get started. But just some good caveats, I think, so that we aren't like taking ChatGPT at face value. So,
And if I can just really quick based on what you're saying, first of all, it's like my children, because I'll say, have you done your homework? And they want to make me happy. And they say, yes, but I need to investigate that further. But just, one note in terms of how you're looking at this and referencing that other platform. If I'm guessing about how you're looking at it right now, this might be a quick first step to determine if I want to do the deeper dive on a platform, because that obviously takes considerable time.
Right. And having been the IRIE person at Northern Essex, like these investigations can take a lot of time. And there are so many possible non-credit degrees that you could offer. And
Right.
often these tools can be cost prohibitive, or you could just be like, time is of the essence. We don't have time to do 30 deep dives. So let's do some narrowing in and try to get a little closer to a target before we like leverage that specific data. And also, I think there's a future where it could have a lot more accuracy and reliability. But that's kind of what's fun about being like on the jagged edge of AI right now, is like we have to be able to differentiate between what is reliable and what isn't about the tool, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't use it. And also we can like push it to be better. So how do you usually start drafting a prompt? Like, do you have a specific style?
Yeah, so like I said, I kind of usually go in with as many words as possible, and then, throw something in there, and then I'll try and give some parameters at first, especially if it's something in writing, maybe kind of say in a casual, or I want to make sure that this is being understood, or there's no context, or there is context, or
Mhm.
it's being given to a highly aware crowd, or I want to say this softer, or say this in a different way when the audience is. So I'm, as I'm exhibiting now, rather verbose sometimes in my in my prompts.
Cool. Okay, so I have kind of like a format. I think of it as like Mad Libs whenever I'm writing a prompt. It's just like been the easiest way for me to figure out how to like do them consistently and not get too verbose, but then still make sure that I'm getting all the information that I need. So the way that I usually approach drafting a prompt is, first I want to start by saying who I am in relation to the AI. So usually I would say, and so I'm actually going to use like your title, Allison, if that's okay. So I'm going to say, like, I am the vice president of advancement at I guess part of me is like not wanting to put Northern Essex in, because sometimes that already like cues it to start hallucinating things. I've asked it for recently, I test a lot of my prompts on Northern Essex because I know it well. And it'll be like,
Yes.
yeah, they offer that program. And I'll be like, great, where's the link? And then it's literally just a fake URL. So sometimes I'm like, maybe I don't want to put Northern Essex in right away. So I'm just
Right.
going to say at a local community college in the Merrimack Valley, Massachusetts. You are on my team, and your role is to analyze and explore possible non credit degree offerings for our institution. So then I usually like to say what my goal is. So here I said who I am, the prompter in relation to the AI. I kind of have started to allude at what the goal is, but I'm going to spell it out more clearly. So I want to, I think about the deliverable question Zia asked, we can get it to do whatever deliverable we want at the end. So I'm not super worried about the formatting right now. I kind of want it to be a conversation, get the information we need, and then say, great, now write an executive summary on that, for example. So I just want to say I want to have a well researched, like data informed discussion around possible areas for growth for our non credit degrees. I also want to just add a couple of other things that you said here, but maybe you could share, like, are there any parameters we're working with around timing? Like, are you under the gun to offer a new program? Are there specific programs you're considering? What's your kind of budget ballpark? Like things
Yeah.
like that we can provide.
I would say one thing in particular, because sometimes when people think of credentials and non-credit degrees, things will come out that yes are um, certificates, but that will be useful in your job with in conjunction with your master's, right? So what are standalone certificates that enable you to be job ready without being coupled with another degree, would be one thing. Um, and then I would say maybe something that isn't state test licensure specific, so nothing that maybe has a test involved with it. And then I would also probably add something, this might be too vague, but something that provides upward mobility. It's not kind of like, great, and then you're only going to be able to do this. Something that would allow you to actually move up.
Sure. So I think what I'm going to do there is describe the institution a little more. I might say our institution is a Hispanic serving institution, and we are like highly focused on upward mobility and equity. We want you to, maybe I'll say since I'm trying to act like one person, I want you to recommend programs that could be a first step towards upward mobility. How's that?
Sure. Yeah, and I would just edit. And I would say be sure to suggest credentials that do not require a test or licensure from.
Thank you. I said be sure not to suggest, but I'll just say.
Oh, not to. Sorry. Okay,
no, you're fine. Yours is clearer, so that's good. And then what I like to do now is just give it some steps to follow. So since this is the pro version, I've already trained it to always ask me questions first. But if you were using a free version, I would always make that the first thing, because even though this is kind of a long prompt, like there's probably something we forgot to specify. And I like when it asks me questions because it helps me think of things I forgot to include in the prompt. So I might say, always ask clarifying questions before you start writing. I truly also imagine if you have like an intern or someone and you ask them to do a task and they're like, great, got it, and just start going. You're like, no, why didn't you clarify before you started that task? That's how I think of it. And then maybe we could just say, first suggest some industries in our region that might be viable options. And I'm also going to say, always cite your sources. I actually find that ChatGPT responds pretty well to tone. So you can, if I capitalize it, it's like, no, take me seriously. I mean what I'm saying to you right now. Don't ignore this point.
It also helps to say things like, what do I need to say to get you to do this thing that I'm trying to get you to do? Sometimes it's like, oh, sorry. I want to add just a couple of things here, just because for people who are watching this, Allison, you may know this, but for the total beginner or someone who's new to this, something that Audrey's doing when she's typing in that prompt is, you might be wondering how she's getting the white space in there to separate some of those paragraphs from each other. Yeah. And I assume, Audrey, that you're hitting Shift and Enter to do that. Is that accurate? Yeah. So Shift and Return on your keyboard. And the other thing for people at home to know is that this is going to become an embedding where everything we say from here on out to the AI, it will remember this context, or at least we hope it will. Sometimes it forgets things, but the idea is that it remembers things throughout this conversation.
Thank you for saying that. And actually, with the new ChatGPT versions, it will actually say memory updated. And if you go back, it'll be like, I remember that you're the vice president of advancement. And I'm like, no, I'm not actually that. I was just with someone. Okay. So
Audrey, just to clarify, the new ChatGPT 4.0, even so, we're obviously on your paid version, but now on the free version, that scrapes up to current websites as well now?
I believe so. I haven't actually tried the free one. Zia, do you know if the free version of 4, I believe it searches the internet?
I believe it does. I think the big benefit you get to paying now is that you get the voice and visual chat, which we're not demoing today, but is pretty remarkable to check out when you get a chance to check out some of those demos. And by the way, it is not 4.0. That would make a lot of sense if it was. 40. It is 4-letter O.
So I'm going to say always cite your sources, and I guess we're just going to start with a suggestion and we'll take it from there. I think it has tons of context. So are we ready?
Yes.
Okay. Memory updated. I am now the VP of advancement.
Congratulations.
Yeah, congrats on your promotion.
Massive, unique portfolio. Okay, so wants to know the current landscape of non-credit programs. Can you provide some insight into the specific demographics? Are there particular industries or career paths? Do we have any partnerships or collabs? And what is our capacity in terms of resources, facilities, and instructors? So that is so helpful, I think, already. It's clearly thinking about like a lot of the constraints that we haven't added to our prompt. I don't think we need to, one thing with the questions, you don't have to answer all of them. You could just skip it and say, just get started. But one of the my favorite ways for this exact use case is to use it as like a project plan or create like a decision rubric for picking non-credit programs. So just some kind of food for thought in terms of other types of deliverables. Are there any of these that you want to fill in that we want to give it a little more context about?
Well, so a question within your question, because of course I wouldn't want to sit here and do a bunch of copy and paste or type in all of the programs. Could I just send it a link and it would know that to say if there were to be a website that had all my programs?
Yes, in theory. I still find that it's better to like copy and paste. If you wanted to accurately know the whole list, I would probably just like upload a spreadsheet with the programs that you offer and the credentials, which we don't have to do in this exact moment. But if I
Sure.
were going to do this, I would just like but like caveat, no student data, nothing that's
Of course.
confidential about or
Yes.
proprietary to any.
Right. I guess for the sake of this, maybe I would just answer two and say, in terms of the specifics regarding the demographics of the student body, I would probably say that this is a little bit more focused on adult learners. Although I don't know that that's going to change too much of the specifics because tomato, tomato, but let's see. And then in terms of for capacity regarding resources, facilities, and instructors, I would guess that it might suggest some things that require some expensive and large hardware. So I would say nothing that requires that because I'm guessing it's going to say something about manufacturing.
Yeah.
And while it is something that, as you know, I'm obsessively interested in, I would be looking at that more for the base curriculum piece and not sort of the hands-on technical components.
So what I would also suggest is when we get to the point of creating a deliverable that we could tell it to in the like fields that it completes about the different credentials that it requires, or suggest you could have it say what the estimated costs might be and what different types of costs could look like. So, and like how long would this generally take to set up? Like what's the current market in our area for faculty in this position? Like things like that, where you
Mm,
can then make some of those decisions also without it making those decisions without showing you why it's not including those things. Because in this case, by saying nothing that requires substantial hardware, we're kind of letting it take the reins and not show us what it might tell. But if we then just say, give me everything, but provide me with that information so I can start to narrow it down, it might show you things you didn't think of. But
mhm.
let's see what it does. I'm going to go ahead and click enter. So let's see, medical billing and coding. And in this case, it really doesn't have Northern Essex's um,
Right.
information at all. So I think we could, it is pulling in some sources from the Merrimack Valley WIB.
It feels to me like it would be a really good idea if you have something that we can copy and paste in that has
Yeah.
courses to give it some context. One thing Audrey was
Mhm.
talking about earlier with the hallucination, it's funny when people talk about it now. I'm like, oh, I don't even see hallucination anymore when I use AI, and I realize it's because I'm giving it so much context and I'm instructing it to just focus on that context that
Yeah.
it ends up not making things up as much. So if you have something like that that might be useful, that you can copy and paste, that might be useful.
I'm going to just say I wanted to share a list of some of the programs we already offer to give more context about where we might not be offering programs that could be valuable in our area. Can you revise your suggestions? And it's interesting that it's picking phlebotomy tech because I think that's a credit, like for credit offering.
Actually, both. And weirdly, you can also do that when, through a third party. You can also do phlebotomy completely online. They send you an arm, which I'm just here to say, next time you get your blood taken, I would double check to make sure that is not someone that got it fully online.
Northern Essex does not apparently offer that program. Yeah, that does sound a little freaky to get your blood taken from someone that's only practiced on a fake arm.
I'm curious, Allison, as you see these results come back, what's coming up for you?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I will say it reminds me of another way that I use ChatGPT, which is sometimes for validation. If I've come up with a list of things, I'll kind of toss it into ChatGPT, or I'll ask ChatGPT the thing and to kind of cross-reference with my list to say, am I being too obvious because ChatGPT is coming with it, or is there something that came up that I might not have in my list? So a lot of these obviously we have, and it is funny, Audrey, to your point, I think some that do end up falling under credit and non-credit, but as you know, it's kind of, if you're offering it sort of modularly, then you can offer a component of it on non-credit. So, and some of them are interesting. I love that it picked up human service because obviously, we have a big health and human services program. Obviously, the green energy and sustainability. I like that it, where applicable, sort of talked about the non-technical component, which is something that, again, I'm trying to focus on. How might we do something where we can offer the sort of base curriculum such that they'd immediately be able to go to industry and trained on their hardware, which is what we're hearing more and more from employers. So, yeah, some food for thought, some, sort of interesting urban farming and community gardening. I don't know that I would put that under the upward mobility sort of
Yeah.
parameter that we gave.
Yeah.
But interesting. And I would probably then put on another one of my hats and look at this and say, great, of these that you just mentioned, again, if it's able to search the internet for anything current, I might say, great, and which one of these might be supported by a grant that we could go
Or
after? Yeah, go
Yeah,
ahead.
I was going to just suggest that there's a couple of ways I think that if you're not doing this like on the fly and you find that this is something you would want to use it for more consistently, if you have the paid version, you could create a custom GPT that is a little bit more trained on how you're thinking about all of these decisions that you're making. You could upload more like materials like the NECC course catalog, the existing like maybe grant portfolio that you have or that you're considering, and just give it way more context than we did in this specific conversation. And then it could be more of like a tool that you can go to and do that gut checking that you were talking about, as well as like for me, the next step would be to say like, okay, now compare, like our institution is Northern Essex. Here is our website. Compare our offerings and the ones that you've just suggested with possible competitors in the region. And then what questions am I not considering? Like that's something I always like to ask. So like how can I be as strategic as possible about making this decision? What are some things that I might not be factoring into how I'm like doing this research? And just using it as a way to maybe like expand your thinking. You're thinking in the grant space. I'm thinking, well, what about our neighboring community colleges or like Google offering a non-degree credit online,
Right.
non-credit degree online. So those are some of the ways that I would take it. I think we can maybe for the sake of turning this into a deliverable, we could just ask it to, can you create can you create the following two deliverables? One, an executive summary. Which were the three that stood out to you? You said human services. The human services options, including specific workforce data from our region. Human services and any of the other ones that maybe we could just include as an example.
Trade and technical, interesting, and then maybe IT as well.
And then maybe we'll also just say a reference table with each of these possible credentials and filling columns with information about possible competitors in our region, marketing tactics, funding opportunities, and the estimated costs
I'd
to.
also add length, because that's one thing that, now that I think about it, is often timely. When we ended up changing the way that we did our CNA program almost 5 years ago now at this point. And one of the things that we had learned just by happenstance was, wow, ours is 2 weeks longer than everyone else's. Why? Right? So then when people are making a decision, that's obviously something that's factoring in. Because at the end of the day, well, we all, want to help develop the workforce, and there is some competition, in certain regions in terms of making sure we're offering the best.
Totally. Okay, I added that in length of the credential. Again, I think we're not at like the AGI, the artificial general intelligence, where it's going to necessarily do exactly what we're wanting on the
Sure.
first shot. But again, we can keep iterating with it. So here we're seeing the executive summary. I'm just reading and talking at the same time. And then we do have the table actually looks pretty good.
That is impressive.
It's not stating the specific competitors. So one thing that we could do after this is basically take it, copy and paste the table. I might even like start a new chat or continue in the chat and say, now do web research and name the specific competitors. But that's something you really would want to fact check yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And I said estimated costs and it just gave like a ballpark number. I would be like, spell out what those costs are. That would help me be able to like quickly gut check.
Yeah.
Might be like, hire 10 new faculty, estimated cost 60K. And it's like, okay, that's a lie.
Yeah.
um,
Yeah, exactly.
to, figure out if it's
Mm-hmm.
relatively ballpark in the area.
Right.
So I think, Zia, anything else you want to add? I know we've taken up a lot of your time, but I hope that this was semi-helpful.
Yeah, two things I'm curious about. One thing that I've noticed is that there is always a moment with every person that does this, and you saw Audrey do it a lot, where you stop and do what I think, Allison, you referred to as a gut check. And I almost want to give it its own name because it's very specific when you're using AI. It sometimes feels like, oh my gosh, this is a system and almost like an entity that really knows a lot of stuff, has read a lot of stuff. I want to just take its advice. I just want to do whatever it's telling me to do. And there are certainly times where it's like, well, I know that they're wrong about this budget or whatever, how much money this is going to cost. But there are other times where we're sort of like, oh, maybe it's right. But we have to stop and gut check and say, like, does it align with my values? Does it align with my lived experience? Because if we don't do that, sometimes we can go down certain roads that lead to places where later on we're kind of like, oh, okay, I used AI. It was very helpful. And I made a decision and took myself down a road that now I'm there. And I'm like, that may have not been, if I had used my human brain for a second, I would have maybe been like, no, I'm taking a different direction or asking a different prompt or whatever it might be.
The gut check, the validation. I mean, there's oftentimes I've gone in and said, with my words and kind of say, can you say this better? And then I go, that was not better. I'm going to,
Yeah.
but the ability to kind of say, when do I versus, no, I'm all right.
Yeah. I do a lot of career coaching and resume work with clients when it comes to using ChatGPT and other systems like it. And oftentimes it will be really useful in rewording things because a resume is supposed to be dry as toast in some ways. You really just want it to say exactly this particular format. So in that ways, it works great. But then there are other times where like I'm writing a chapter for something and I'm writing my thoughts and I say, ooh, can you reword this? And when it rewords it, yeah, it does sound more grammatically correct, but it sounds less like me. And those are those moments where I'm like, you know what? It would probably sound better, but I'm going to rework it myself a little bit. I'm curious, Allison, on a scale of 1 to 10, I want to see how much knowledge you've picked up in this session with us. Let's just say that this is relevant. This scale we're measuring is just for this particular skill today that we used the way we used it today. 10 being like, now you could go show this off to somebody, and 1 being, I have no idea. Where did you come in and where are you leaving?
Yeah, I would say again, not an absolute Luddite. So I feel like I knew how to have conversations. I definitely knew shift return, and understand that some don't. I for sure liked the element of sort of how many parameters that you can give and sort of the context setting. Um, Even sort of being really specific. I think I've seen at one point that it can produce tables, but I've not been savvy enough to do that. So, in terms of how I want the information, asking it to ask me questions, which is fantastic, because sometimes I think there's that frustration of then then you have to keep kind of saying no, but I meant, um, and then you did solve one very important question for me, which is, do you say please and thank you? Which I sometimes get in my head and feel like I need to, but I'm glad that to see.
No, I sometimes do. And there's like, I always think in my head, like one day if these robots do take over, I kind of want it on the record. I was polite.
I've had this philosophical conversation when ALEXA, I say it because there's one in my studio here. One of my kids will order it around, and one of a relative one time said, maybe you should teach them to say please and thank you. And I was like, yeah, but then are we then teaching them that robots have feelings by doing that we're going to make them feel bad? Like, I don't know. Like, yes, they should be learning to say please and thank you, but also like maybe they should be making a distinction between human and non-human subjects. So it's a continuing philosophical.
Good point.
It's a very interesting point. I know one time I had a friend make fun of me because I said thank you to an automatic door. So there is an opportunity to be a little bit too deferential to technology. So
but also remember that it is going to, the way that it comes up with responses, and both of you may know this, but those listening may be unfamiliar with this. It's almost like it's doing your phone's version of text prediction, but with way more context and way more learning and way more context. And so therefore, if you use words like please and thank you, the result is you might get a friendlier AI. So
yeah, however, if you had it and you're like, that was an utter failure, that was a terrible result, sometimes it actually will be like, you're so right, I'm sorry for disappointing you, let me try again.
Yeah. It does like to grovel. It does like to compliment you. I often will sometimes say, if it's overly complimentary, I'd be like, okay, but now you're a mean, strict English teacher reviewing this. Now tell me what you think. And then all of the criticism comes out, which is very useful.
Or I love that. Say, like, I want to reframe this executive summary for the president of a community college. Now I want to reframe it for a corporate partner. I want to reframe this executive summary for someone on our board who disagrees with the recommendations I'm going to make. And each one of those, you can be so specific. And sometimes the nuance and the tone changes that it makes are so subtle. I truly, like, I'd love to think that I'm a good writer, but I don't think I would necessarily jump to picking that word choice. And it's like, oh my gosh, yes, that is a better way to word that for the exact audience.
How do you go about, thinking of all this? I feel like sometimes, as you know, I'm also, in a grad program, and we'll have the conversation with my student hat on, then have a conversation with my professional hat on. And sometimes I'll have a conversation with my mom hat on. And I guess I don't know the difference between when I'm starting a new conversation, just kind of opening up and continuing the same one. Am I confusing it then by going in with so many different tones / personas?
I think that's why for me, I like to just be specific in my first prompt of who I am in the prompt and the relationship to the AI. And in that, if my actual tone expectation changes, I would specify there, like, I want you to provide the answer in technical writing, or pretend you're a literature student, like be as verbose and grandiose as you want, or whatever. Like, specifying it there is fine. But then I do think with the memory piece that we were talking about, it does then remember all those things. So that's why I just think specifying in your specific prompt the tone that you want, or going back in and deleting the ones where you may have like set it totally off track. But also, I use different tools sometimes for different hats. Like, I prefer to use Claude for academic stuff more.
Yeah.
Okay.
And you'll experiment and see what ways of working work best for you. The one thing I will say also is that Audrey was talking about custom instructions earlier. Are you familiar with that, Allison? So it's part of the pro version. I don't think it's going to be in the free 4.0. I can't remember if they're putting it in there. But basically what it allows you to do is give it an initial context that it will never forget. So for Audrey, she's like, make sure to ask me questions. Therefore, she doesn't need to always specify that every single time. Oh, she's going to show you her custom instructions. Yeah, so like, you can say, hey, just so you know, here are the different hats that I wear in my life. If you're ever confused as to which hat I'm referring to or what lens I want to have, make sure to clarify and ask me.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I just always have this one. I don't give it more than that. I don't really care because I use it to make so many sample prompts to test with people and stuff. But I just always wanted to ask clarifying questions.
So Allison, the one question I had for you that I think you've already answered is your biggest takeaways, and you had mentioned a number of things. Is there anything else that you're taking away that you want to just distill here?
Yeah, I think like so many things, I probably put this in a box, and I think a lot of other people do, in terms of when, like, oh, that might be something that you do. And I think this kind of showed that it really might be a way of fine tuning a thought or deciding kind of like where to attack something first, and that there's a lot you can use it in, as opposed to this idea of something that we need to put off and down the road until we understand it more,
Mm.
are comfortable, or can, you know, take a certificate course in. That it is accessible in as much as you want it to be, in as much as you need it to be, and sort of to at least start to toe step in and use it, I think, in decision making. And it's not always top of mind, and I know that I probably use it a lot more than most. Again, I was surprised at the beginning of one of my classes when someone brought it up and someone said, "What's ChatGPT?" And I almost fell off my chair. But it's running the gamut. So I think, for someone that is aware and uses it a little bit, I don't think it's as top of mind as it could and should be
Yeah.
for things such as this that might help me
Research is telling us that students are learning it faster than faculty are. But Audrey and I have talked about the fact that community colleges, that might be slightly skewed. A lot of the students that I teach, like yours, tend to be like, "What's ChatGPT?" Or they've heard of it, but they don't know. And when they realize, "Ooh, I could write an essay with this," like they're kind of like mind blown, which is so interesting to me, because I've been thinking about this for a year now, or over a year now. So I asked you earlier for your growth in numbers, just out of curiosity. What number did you start at, and where do you think you're leaving us?
Oh yeah, so I would probably say maybe, I don't know, maybe a 5, and probably, I don't know. I guess it's subjective.
Well,
So
I'm just
I
saying
don't
in the
know.
context of the skill we learned today. Like, obviously, there's
Yeah, yeah.
Like, give me a
I'm
10. Just
right.
kidding.
Well, you just
Yeah,
have to.
yeah, no.
Yeah.
Honestly, I'm going to say probably 9.5, 10. I don't want to sound cocky, but I could probably walk someone through this now.
That's great.
Okay.
That's great. That's good. And it doesn't have to be. I just like seeing the growth. That's a good four
Yeah.
or five solid points of growth, which is awesome. Thanks for being with us today.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for joining, Allison. It was great to see you.
Wow, that
All right.
was such a fun conversation. I loved watching you go through all of that with her and walking her through the thinking. I loved seeing all the light bulbs going off. What do you think your big takeaway from this was, just on as a consultant, as someone who teaches people?
I think that that's such a good question. I am still learning to trust the tool myself, and so I kind of went into it worried that she wasn't going to find value in this session, because AI wasn't going to be able to, like, on the spot give her the perfect answer that she wanted about, like, exactly what non-credit program she should offer. But I feel like through our conversation, we thought about a lot of different ways that she could now, like, expand either the quality, the breadth, the efficiency of what she's already doing, and use it as, like, I hate to sound corny or use Microsoft's term that they've now coined, but as like her co-pilot or thought partner, rather than just like doing the work for her. So even though she already had some of that AI literacy, I hope that it expanded, like, her way of thinking around how she can just build out her own capacity using this technology. And then maybe one day we'll be crafting AIs to do all these things, but I'm not sure if I'm ready for that myself.
Yeah, it's a crazy world out there. I would love to just touch on a little bit on the events that occurred this week. With 4.0 coming out, and it's not 4.0 as you heard in our conversation.
Yeah.
4.0, which is a interesting name, Sam Altman, but I think I heard him say they're not going to do any more numbers for the next versions of GPT. Did you see the conversation between a guy named Rocky and the AI about a job? He's interviewing at OpenAI. I don't know. I think it was a fake situation, but he was saying, "I'm interviewing." Oh my goodness! Have you seen any of the voice demos?
Yeah.
Jeez.
Yeah. Wild.
Like there's one. So this one, he's like talking to her about I'm applying for a job at OpenAI. Ever heard of it? And I say her because it's a female voice model. Another piece of news that I also heard was Scarlett Johansson, who
I know.
Yeah, was in the movie Her, played an AI. They asked her if they could model their voice off of her, and she said no. But then when the demo came out, it sounded just like Scarlett Johansson, and she apparently had her lawyers say, "Hey, ask them how they made this. Like, I want specifics on how they made this." And they took the voice off. Apparently, they took it off of the tool. So That was very interesting, but it's a very flirty conversation, like that she's giggling a lot, and there's like this, and he puts on a hat at one point and says, "Should I wear this to my interview?" And she kind of says, "I don't know, you should maybe rethink that." It's very interesting. My wife saw this clip and she goes, "Please don't fall in love with AI and leave me for AI." It's like,
oh God, I know. It is a wild world. And then did you see about Microsoft yesterday? They're embedding Copilot into all their laptops and AI into their laptops going forward, and it will have a photographic memory of your screen. Ooh. So you could say, pull up the PowerPoint that had the red car, and it, in theory, should be able to do that. The use cases are kind of scary, and I don't know how I feel about it. Like, especially if it's a work laptop. I mean, I'm not saying I do anything I work for myself, so I know what I'm using my laptop for, but it's definitely interesting to imagine. It's like taking this idea of Copilot as a desktop app, which I downloaded and I've already like started finding myself using the keyboard shortcut, which is Option Space, to start a conversation with it.
Now, this is Copilot, or is this ChatGPT's desktop? Oh,
sorry. ChatGPT has desktop.
I downloaded that too. I agree. So convenient. So much better than going to the website.
But now Copilot is like embedded. So it's not even like you have to enable it. In theory, it would be on their laptops. And I'm like, who knows? It's an arms race right now. But I'm waiting for SIRI, because I have Macs in my family, to start being a little bit more intelligent. Because if it says one more time, like, I can't access the web right now to answer that question, right, I'm going to get frustrated.
Yeah, it makes me think about, there's a huge opportunity, I feel like, for local LLMs, like Ollama is one example. I thought that Llama and Ollama were the same model, and I don't think they are. I think Llama is Meta's model and Ollama is a different one. If I have to verify that. But it's a local one. It doesn't connect to the internet. So in some ways, like the things that you're talking about, like remembering the screen and everything, I could see in a computer lab in a school that being very, very dicey. So you're right. Exactly. It's totally an arms race. And even since we last spoke like 2 weeks ago, like things have changed again. It is really, really hard to keep up.
It is. So it makes me like want to say even more to someone who feels like Allison called herself not a Luddite. I know people who have just jokingly described themselves as Luddites. And I'm like, just don't be afraid to try, because this moment is happening so fast. The changes are happening so fast. And like the longer you wait, the more I think in some sense the more catching up you might have to do. But the good news is at the same time, like you can catch up. The learning curve is so fast because it is so intuitive. So don't be afraid to give it a try.
Yeah. You can't break anything is what I like to say. So
what did you say?
I said, you can't break anything. I've always told people that in the context of tech training, because people are always afraid to get started with things. Or what if I do something wrong? Or what if I ruin something? And it's like, you really, in most apps these days, it is hard to break something, delete something forever. There's cloud storage. There's ways to get things back. There's Control Z, which for those of you who don't know is undo, or Command Z if you're on a Mac, or shake your phone. So there's always ways to, and with ChatGPT, there's really just no way to break anything.
But just don't upload your personal data.
That's right. That's a really important thing that we'll always come back to on this show. All right. So this is Audrey Ellis from T3 Advisory. Audrey, thanks for being here. This is Zia Hassan from EdTech BFF. Our websites are in the show notes. You can check us out, and we will see you on the next one.